Assalamu alaikum to all our audience. My name is Sayyid Nazim Kazmi, and with me today are Sayyid Ali Imam and Sayyid Firdaus. Thank you, brothers, for joining us today. And today is a rather special show. We've done 7 shows on responding to Farid and have had no response from him whatsoever. That deafening silence from his side only points to one conclusion. And so, for the benefit of the listeners, we thought we'd provide further evidence on the event that hasn't been covered by Farid or any of the apologists for this event, and we thought we would share it with you. So one thing that Farid mentioned in his Faridist ideology, his Faridism as it is that there was only a single narrator or very few narrators, and this was an incident which wasn't covered by very many people. So today, with the assistance of Brother Ali Imam and Brother Firdaus, we are hoping to bring you some more evidence which hasn't been dealt with. And I'm not even sure if Farid knows that this evidence exists. I'd be surprised if he did. He seems to be pretty poor in responding to the evidence that we've provided so far. So, Brother Ali Imam, if I could come to you, and could you just, for the benefit of the listeners, outline the theme of today's show and the points we will be discussing today?
Assalamu alaikum, viewers. Thank you for joining us in our 8th episode, our response and challenge to Farid Bahraini in reference to the objections he's raised on the incident, on the attack that was made on the Prophet's daughter. May peace and blessings be upon her and her progeny. What we're going to do today is essentially we're going to focus on this event as recorded in Islamic history generally. So when we look at Islamic history, it's essentially consists of religious knowledge or events around the Prophet, may peace and blessings be upon him, his family, may peace and blessings be upon them, and the companions, may peace and blessings be upon the righteous ones, and those that came after. Therefore, it's a little different from modern day history because it consists of like historical reports transmitted from generations of Muslim scholars, essentially. With this dogma in Sunnism, in which they have to sanctify and hide these events, you will never know the totality of them. However, if a certain event is narrated or documented, especially in this in abundance, and the fact that they have to try to distort these events, it's very likely to be true, especially when we know that these people who narrate these events or document these events, they would not have no reason to invent an account which would essentially embarrass them and oppose their ideology. So this in itself raises further questions as to why these events were distorted in the way they were. So as I mentioned before, we are going to be discussing other historical reports that have reached us that give us slightly more information about what actually occurred. So firstly, I'd like to come to the famous scholar from the subcontinent. His name was Shibli Nomani, and in his book Al-Furuq, which is a book dedicated on the life of Umar, the second usurper of Islam, according to the Shias, that is. And by the way, Shibli Nomani is a known scholar. You can by all means go up there, go on Google, type in, search it, you'll find his details. He was a major scholar from the subcontinent. And this book, as I said before, is dedicated to the life of Umar. He says on page 89, not only the Ansar, but Ali alayhi salam and Bani Hashim, as well to acknowledge the election of Abu Bakr as Khalifa, though the latter did not do so readily. See, this is a major admission from Shibli Nomani, scholar from the subcontinent, from India, who's admitted very explicitly that the Sahaba abandoned the Prophet's funeral preparation to go to Saqifah, the shed of Saqifah, Banu Sayeda, to dispute with the Ansar on the matter of leadership. And the outcome of that, people were forced to pledge allegiance to Abu Bakr. And that included the Ansar, Imam alayhi salam, and Bani Hashim, to acknowledge the Caliphate of Abu Bakr. So this is something majorly detrimental to Sunnis, because here it goes to show you under what condition Abu Bakr was chosen as a caliph, a so-called caliph. And this is the reason why Shias consider him to be the first usurper of Islam, under the circumstances as to how he came into power. And of course, naturally, our position is that Imam Ali alayhi salam was most worthy of caliphate. And it was for this very reason that he opposed them, like the Bani Hashim. like the Ansar, who made it very explicit on other accounts as well, in which they said that we are not going to drop our swords until Ali pledged allegiance. So they were in support of Imam Ali alayhi salam. As I said before, we want to just talk about showing the events being documented from other historians and contemporary scholars. Again, there's an attempt to cover up what actually happened. And this is why they're left with gaps in history, because then when they disregard these reports or try to deny these reports, even though they're reliable and authentic, and the scholars, many of the scholars have attested it, they're left with gaps in history. So this is another historian, Ibn Athir, and he talks about the events of Saqifah under the chapter, the hadith of Saqifah and the Caliphate of Abu Bakr. And he says, when the Messenger of Allah passed away, the Ansar gathered at Saqifah of Banu Sayeda to pledge allegiance to Sa'd ibn Ubadah. So the news reached to Abu Bakr. So he came to them with Umar and Abu Ubaidah ibn al-Jarrah and said, what is this? They said, there should be one leader from among you and one leader from among us. Abu Bakr said, from among us are the best leaders, meaning the Quraysh, and from among you are the ministers. Then Abu Bakr said, I am content with you to choose of these two men, Umar and Abu Ubaidah, the trusted of this ummah. Umar said, who of you dares to proceed ahead of the steps of a person? Umar said, who of you dares to proceed ahead of the steps of a person which have been given precedence by the Prophet? So you can see there's this big hype here. Abu Bakr is trying to say, listen, you've got this option. Either choose Umar or Abu Ubaidah, the trusted of this ummah. And Umar says, look, who of you dares to proceed ahead of the steps of a person which has been given precedence by the Prophet, meaning that he was from those who led the prayer. So Umar is saying, who am I? Like, don't push me forward. Abu Bakr, you led the prayers. And by the way, the whole issue about leading the prayers is a whole big story for that in itself. The whole incident is contradicted, and who led the prayers, why they led the prayers, the circumstances of that, should they have even been there to lead the prayers. But you can see Umar has basically come forward and says, look, who of you dares to proceed ahead of the steps of a person which have been given precedence by the Prophet? And then Umar pledged allegiance to him, meaning Abu Bakr. So he switched it. And then people pledged allegiance to him. Now, this is an important part. This kind of emphasizes the words of Shibli Nomani as well, and something which we've already established. Bukhari mentions there, we've got the commentary of Ibn Hajar Asqalani and other scholars. He says, then the Ansar and some of the people from among the Ansar said, we will not pledge allegiance except to Ali alayhi salam. He said, and Ali alayhi salam and Bani Hashim and Zubair and Talha refused to pledge allegiance. Now, it's interesting because what their motive was, we don't know at this particular moment in time. In support of Imam Ali alayhi salam, they could have had their own political reasons, we don't know. Because the same group of people later, as we learn in history, they actually opposed Imam Ali alayhi salam. Some of them were from those who refused to give the pledge, and also there were the others who broke the pledge. So anyway, I'll continue. It says, we will not pledge allegiance except to Ali alayhi salam. He said, and Ali alayhi salam, Bani Hashim and Zubair and Talha refused to pledge allegiance. And Zubair said, I will not put the sword into its shield until the allegiance is pledged to Ali alayhi salam. So Umar said to those who were with him, take away his sword and strike it to the rock. So here it's about Umar giving this order, not Abu Bakr. Then it says, then Umar came and took them to pledge allegiance. This very important passage recorded by Ibn Athir, who narrates the events of Saqifah, Banu Sayeda. And you can see there's so much detail that's been mentioned here. It's all linked to some of the previous references which we've discussed, with a slight addition that here it's not actually Abu Bakr giving the order, it's actually Umar. And it's been also said when Ali heard about the allegiance to Abu Bakr, he came out with a shirt without wearing a robe or a garment in a hurry until he pledged allegiance to him. He then asked for his robe and garment and put them on. So meaning the moment that Imam alayhi salam heard about the pledge of allegiance about Abu Bakr, he practically, I shouldn't really say this, but he practically ran out like half dressed and he pledged allegiance immediately. Now, what's crucial here, there's something important. I don't know if some of the viewers remember, but we've previously discussed some of the narrations which Imam alayhi salam believed he was the most worthy of leadership after the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him. If you can recall that tradition. Now compare that tradition with what's going on here. How do we notice a difference in character of personalities? These reports essentially contradict other reports that we've discussed before, like, for example, the tradition in Musannaf ibn Abi Shayba. So this report has actually been narrated by Ikramah, who's a Khariji, who, by the way, some of the Sunni scholars consider him to be extremely reliable. What does that say about his reliability? Because we know for certain now that this report contradicts the whole idea of Imam alayhi Islam opposing Abu Bakr on the issue of the Pledge of Allegiance. The next statement is quite important because it actually shows emphasis on this. He says, and the authentic account is that Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali alayhi Islam did not pledge allegiance except after 6 months, and Allah knows best. So even Ibn Athir, the famous historian, the famous scholar, he rejects this report. He says that report is problematic because what's established historically is that the Pledge of Allegiance was not given 6 months after. And this is exactly the same thing which has been narrated by Bukhari himself. Bukhari reports the same report. So this goes to show you, if we were to go back into the period of Ikramah, that these events were distorted at a very earlier period. This tradition clearly contradicts established facts. This is from the book Al-Kamil fi Tarikh, volume 2, page number 187. This event has not, it's not just reached through Shia historians. It's not just narrated through Sunni historians. It's even narrated through people there's even a question mark about. So let's assume for a minute this person was not a Shia. I know some people claim he's a Shia, but likewise there were also others who said he wasn't a Shia. But I will come to that in a moment. It's from Al-Masudi in his book Maruj al-Dhahab, volume 3, page number 69, and he reports a narration on the authority of Hamad ibn Salama, who said Urwa ibn Zubair would excuse his brother, Abdullah ibn Zubair that is, when it would be mentioned that he entrapped Bani Hashim and gathered wood to burn them, saying, verily, by that he wanted to scare them, meaning he just wanted to scare them, so that they would be obedient to him, meaning that they would submit to him. Just like how Bani Hashim were scared by gathering wood around them to burn them, since they refused to pledge allegiance previously. And this report cannot be mentioned in this book, and then he says, I'll cover it in another book. It's interesting because what he's saying is that Urwa used to make excuses about his brother. So just to make the Bani Hashim scared, and that's what it was. They were not going to actually do it. It was just a mere threat. And that mere threat, by the way, is still not acceptable, because we know from the famous hadith that anyone who scares the people of Medina, puts fear in the heart, is cursed by them, by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the angels. In reference to Al-Masudi, Ahmad ibn al-Sadiq al-Ghumari, he says, nay, they attributed Dar al-Qutni to Shi'ism. So we know in Sunnism, if you used to say something virtue of Imam al-Islam, they used to call you Shia. This is the way, the mindset that early Sunnis had. Unfortunately, I think Sayyid Jalal mentioned that there was a person who said, whose virtue shall I read next? Usman or Ali's, right? And they just said he was a Rafidi just because he made that statement. It wasn't even his belief. So here you can say he's saying the same thing. He's saying that, look, they even attribute the Qutni to Shi'ism, although he was far from it. Just because he memorized the poems of Himyari, then he says, nay, they talked about Shafi and attributed to him Shi'ism, just because he agreed with the Shias on some issues in which the Shias were right and did not innovate in, such as pronouncing Bismillah loudly, performing Qunut during the morning prayers, wearing a ring on the right hand, and his inclination towards the Ahlul Bayt alayhi Islam. May Allah be pleased with him, pointed to that in his famous poems. And they called Al-Masudi weak and attributed to him Shi'ism just because of the statement in Maruj al-Dhahab, the things which the companions of the Messenger of Allah deserve virtue because it is their proceeding to bring Iman, migration, support to Allah's Messenger, and peace and blessings be upon him, nearness to him, conviction and sacrifice by their souls for him, their knowledge about the Quran, jihad for the sake of Allah, godliness, asceticism, judgment, chastity, knowledge, and all that. Ali alayhi salam had the biggest share besides Ali alayhi salam's distinction by special virtues such as brotherhood inclined towards him and the status of Harun alayhi salam. When we look at Sunni scholarship, many scholars were accused of Shiism, and this is a game that was essentially played, and this is a game that's played now. If anyone narrates something which is historical, factual, and by the way, being a Shia is not an issue, because they've narrated from Shias, they've even narrated from Rafsis as well. For them, that's not a problem. But because of this Shia phobia, that's all it comes to, Shia phobia, anyone who supported the views of Shias or agreed with their opinions, they were labeled as Shias, or they were even labeled as Rafsis. Ahmad ibn al-Sadiq Al Ghumari, who was a Maliki scholar from Africa, a famous scholar, by the way, you can look him up, he confirms this, that this was also the case of Masudi, who had this very strong view and position when it comes to Imam alayhi salam exceeding all the companions in virtue. This position is not something which I can assure you is not something which is conjured up from thin air. This is something which is well established, a fact from the books of opponents. They know this themselves. But yeah, I just wanted to quote this to show you that when it comes to Masudi, who documented that when he used to come to Urwa ibn Zubair making excuses for his brother, for Abdullah ibn Zubair, he said, look, this was merely just to scare the Bani Hashim, and that's all it was. And Al-Masudi has documented this, again, another historian, and now we've got a more of a sort of contemporary type of scholar, a famous scholar, who some consider him to be even a mujtahid from North Africa, a Maliki scholar, who says that this man, he wasn't a Shia, they just merely attribute Shiism to him because of his position when it comes to the Ahlul Bayt of Islam, or some of the views and beliefs that they had, which of course, these are not things which were made up, they all have Islamic basis, they are essentially conveying and acting the prophetic sunnah, of Allah's Messenger, may peace and blessings be upon him. And this is one of the reasons why we emphasize as following the Ahlul Bayt of Islam, because we only believe that is a true form of Islam, where there's no deviation, the truth are not hidden and concealed like our opponents do when it comes to these particular personalities who the idolize. So in terms of references, this has come to us in abundance, and we just presented one example of that. And we've got the attestation of historians who confirmed that clearly the bay'ah was not given something immediately. There was extreme circumstances coming to the bay'ah, how the Ahlul Bayt al-Islam were forced, scared, threatened, and this is something which is well documented and narrated in abundance, and a lot of historians confirm this. Thank you, Sayyid Nazim.
Thank you, Sayyid Ali Imam. Just to quickly recap, Shibli Nomani, a renowned scholar in the subcontinent, confirms the events at Saqifah and how everybody was too busy to decide who was going to lead the Ummah rather than show some common courtesy and tend to the preparations for the funeral and for the funeral itself of the Prophet. Regardless of anything else, that is indicative of the contempt that many of the Sahaba held for the Ahl Bayt. Even if you don't genuinely have any concern for a person, but you have some sort of affiliation with them, you would show common decency and respect by at least waiting until someone's burial before squabbling over the reins of power. But yes, what more can we say? It's history. It's disputed to an extent, but it's clear for anyone who wants to see. And he confirmed the conflict between Sahaba and Ahlul Bayt al-Islam. Thank you, Sayyid Ali Imam, for mentioning Ibn Athir, where it again shows that Umar ordered hostilities on the house of Sayeda Fatima Sallallahu Alaiha, and was involved in or at least in ordering of a scuffle, a fight between the various Sahaba on both sides. And that Mullah Ali ibn Abi Talib al-Islam were either forced or put in a position where they had to pledge allegiance, even though this was 6 months later. And thank you for highlighting the events narrated by Ibn Athir, which go back to Ikrimah. That tends to give an alternative view of what happened, and the fact that Mullah Amir al-Islam were rushing to give the Pledge of Allegiance. So there's a clear conflict here. Was it 6 months or was it straight away? And out of these two reports, one has to be false. If it was over a day or a couple of hours, you can try and justify that or try and explain that away. But a 6 month difference is not one that's easily explained away. The only conclusion one can come to is that one of these two narrators is lying. Either Ikrimah or Aisha are lying about this. Now, it's for the viewers, for the listeners to make up their mind which report you're going to follow. But the conflict here is clear, and it shows a tendency from this early period to try muddy the waters and distort historical narratives to try and mislead readers as to what actually occurred. Then we come to Al-Masudi, who Sayyid al-Imam you mentioned. Grateful for you for doing so, because he's taken a report from Urwa ibn Zubair, who was making excuses for his brother Abdullah. When Abdullah ibn Zubair corralled the descendants of the Prophet, his family, his Ahl al-Bayt, and segregated them in a valley and threatened to burn them if they didn't submit to his rule. Urwa rightly and accurately made the comparison that this is exactly what Abu Bakr and Umar had done. So why are people talking about Abdullah? Neither party, neither Abdullah nor Abu Bakr or Umar were justified in doing so. But we have these reports which corroborate each other, which support each other and strengthen each other. Not only are the contemporary companions at the time of the incident at the door saying this took place, but then you have successive companions and the next generation also referring to this in trying to justify their own atrocities against the Ahl Bayt. I think that's, if there's a genuine seeker of knowledge and somebody who is trying to get to the bottom of what actually happened, I think this is quite conclusive, and it's not easily explained. What can be said for people who want to make excuses, they'll find ways to deny the truth. So, Sayyid al-Imam, are there any additional or parallel or alternative reports mentioning these events that you can highlight?
Jazakallah Nazim Kazmi, thank you for that, Sayyid. Beautifully summed up, as always. So now we'll come to Tabri mentioning other accounts of this incident. And this report comes via another Tabi. This is from Humayd Ibn Abdul Rahman. Inshallah, said for those who discuss the authenticity of the reports and how they once again tampered with this particular narration. But before that, History of Tabri, the English edition, volume 19, page number 187 and 189. And in the footnotes on page number 187, the annotator says, although the timing of the events is not clear, it seems that Ali and his group came to know about Saqifah after what had happened there. At this point, his supporters gathered in the house of Fatima, and Abu Bakr and Umar, fully aware of Ali's claim and fearing serious threat from his supporters, summoned him to the mosque to swear the oath of allegiance. All refused, meaning they refused, and so the house was surrounded by an armed band led by Abu Bakr and Umar, who threatened to set on fire if Ali and his supporters refused to come out and swear allegiance to Abu Bakr. The scene grew violent and Fatima was furious. And this has been written by the annotator. And then he mentions other sources, and he goes, you can refer to Bladuri, Ansab al-Shraf, Yaqubi's Tarikh, and Ibn Qutayba. Some of these sources we've already covered. Some of them we will touch on in future shows. So this is quite interesting statement made by the annotator and how he discusses these events. Bear in mind, we've also got reports suggesting that Imam Ali gave immediate bay'ah. So, and then you've got reports suggesting that it was given after 6 months. So you can see that there's a clear attempt, again, as we keep stressing, to hide and distort these events much as possible. Now we will come to the report of Humayd Ibn Abdul Rahman al-Himyari. And he says, so I'm not going to read the whole the chain, but inshallah said for those who discuss the authenticity of the chain, the narrators. When the Messenger of God passed away, Abu Bakr was in a detached part of Medina. He was on the outskirts. He came and uncovered the Prophet's face, may peace and blessings be upon him, and kissed him and said, may my father and mother be your ransom. How good you are both living and dead. I swear by the Lord of the Kaaba that Muhammad is dead. Then he went to the pulpit and found Umar ibn Khattab standing there, threatening the people and saying, "The messenger of God is alive and not dead. He will return. Go out after those who are spreading these lies about him and cut off their hands and strike the necks and crucify them." And this is something we touched on in the previous show. The circumstances as to why Umar could have possibly be doing this. Clearly trying to buy time by making this statement and making these threats and telling people to prevent this rumor from being spread around that the Prophet, may peace and blessings be upon him, passed away. This is the same Umar who was from amongst those people who refused to give the Prophet, may peace and blessings be upon him, a pen and paper. For him, the Quran was sufficient. But now he didn't want people to even know that the Holy Prophet, may peace and blessings be upon him, passed away. So much so he considered it a lie. And he even said, crucify those people. Whether people were crucified or killed, we don't know about this. And what would be the implications of killing somebody? Let's assume that Umar did have people killed and slaughtered for merely saying the Messenger of Allah passed away. And this is the same Umar who said the Quran is sufficient. And it took Abu Bakr to say to the Messenger of Allah, he had passed away. And then he accepted this. And then Abu Bakr said, remain silent. Abu Bakr asked him to be silent, but he refused to listen. So Abu Bakr spoke, saying that God has revealed to his Prophet, verily you will die, and so will they. Then on the day of resurrection, you will dispute before your Lord. Then he said, Muhammad is only a messenger of God, and many messengers have passed away before him. So if he dies or is killed, will you turn back upon your heels? He who turns back on his heels will do no harm to God, and God will reward them. Whether this statement is true or not, we don't know. Allah knows best. Whether Abu Bakr actually said these words, and he quoted this passage from the Holy Quran to Umar, who was previously instructing people to stop and prevent this rumor from being spread that the Messenger of Allah passed away. The same Umar, as I said before, who refused the pen and paper to the Holy Prophet, may peace and blessings be upon him, and said the Quran is enough. You would naturally assume that he had some sort of knowledge of the Holy Quran, was unaware of this passage where Abu Bakr had to essentially tell him to shut up, be quiet. The Prophet is like any other messenger, and many messengers have passed away like those before him. And interestingly, this very same passage also gives us proof that the Prophet was not going to just die a natural death. Look at the verse. It says, so if he dies or is killed, will you turn back upon your heels? And this is exactly what they did. This is what the companions did. When the Prophet, may peace and blessings be upon him, was martyred, they did turn back upon the heels. And inshallah, in future shows, we can perhaps go into this and this verse and how we can actually prove that the death of the Holy Prophet, may peace and blessings be upon him, he didn't pass away a natural death. And this is something which has been kept hidden from the Muslims. Our Prophet till today is still so innocent that not only was he a victim to injustice during his life, but even in his last final days. And then later his family were suppressed, put under house arrest. And from generation to generation they suffered, to the point that they couldn't even name the children after Imam Ali alayhi salam. If you were known to have the name Ali, they would kill you. So anyway, let me carry on with this tradition. Abu Bakr says, he who formerly worshipped Muhammad, then the deity whom he worshipped is dead. So here, Abu Bakr is saying that, you people who are like so obsessed about the Holy Prophet, may peace and blessings be upon him, astaghfirullah, and who made him some sort of like deity, in the sense that elevated his stage to the point of almost like a form of worship. He says, he who formerly worshipped Muhammad, then the deity whom he worshipped is dead. He who formerly worshipped God, who has no associates, then God is alive and immortal. Some people from among the companions of Muhammad, that they didn't know that these two verses were revealed until Abu Bakr recited them that day. So there were people present who were totally oblivious of this verse. It was like they'd never heard it before. And the moment he read it, these two passages, it was as if it had reached them for the first time. Then a man suddenly came running and said, listen to me. The Ansar have gathered in a roof building of Banu Sayeda to give their oath of allegiance to one of their men. They said, let us have a ruler from us and let the Quraysh have another from them. Abu Bakr and Umar rushed away, as though each of them led the other, until they came to them. Umar wanted to speak, but Abu Bakr stopped him. I think Abu Bakr realized how incompetent he was in dealing with the situation, as we've demonstrated before when he wanted to go around chopping people's heads off. I will not disobey the Prophet's successor twice in a day. He's putting an act on in front of the Ansar. I will not disobey the Prophet's successor twice in a day. So here he's kind of hinting towards the Ansar as well, that there is some sort of choice or preference that's already been made. And this is Umar's choice. This is my choice. I will not disobey the Prophet's successor twice in a day. Abu Bakr spoke and did not leave out anything that was either revealed about the Ansar or was said by the Messenger of God with regards to the fine qualities. He said, you know that the Messenger of God said, if the people took one away and the Ansar another, I would take the Ansar's path. O Saad, you know that the Messenger of God has said while you were sitting that the Quraysh were the masters of this authority. The righteous follow their kind and the wicked follow theirs. So here Abu Bakr is essentially, he's glorifying the Ansar, but at the same time he's saying, listen, despite this, we, the Quraysh, we have this authority we have this position in terms of authority. Then Saad replied, you have spoken the truth. We are the visors and you are the rulers. Umar said, stretch out your hand, O Abu Bakr, so that I may give you the oath of allegiance. Abu Bakr replied, nay, rather you. Hey, Abu Bakr is becoming more humble. No, rather you. The same person that he's telling Umar to be quiet, remain quiet. He says, no, rather you, O Umar, you are stronger than I, but I pledge allegiance to you. This is the same person, the same Umar, who said the Quran is sufficient for us, who wasn't even aware about these verses of the Holy Quran until Abu Bakr told him. The same Abu Bakr who told him to be quiet, he said, listen, be quiet. You have to read him the verses of the Holy Quran and to get him off that sort of mentality that, I'll go around chopping people's heads off, enters into the shed of Banu Sayeda, tells Umar to remain silent because he knows he's not competent enough to deal with the situation, is now trying to get everyone else to pledge allegiance to Umar. God knows what the situation would have been like if Umar became the first Khalifa. That's all I can say. Abu Bakr is smart. He's playing another game here. He knew that Umar was not competent enough to take this role. He knew that. He knew Umar was going to be like, listen, we know Umar's already addressing him as the Khalifa of Allah at this point, right? Earlier, he's calling him the successor of the Prophet. Do you think Umar would have accepted that role? No, he wouldn't have. He would have actually said, listen, I don't want this role. You take it. Then it says Umar was stronger of the two. So there was a struggle there, essentially. They were trying to push each other's arm forward. And being Abu Bakr being the older, Umar being slightly younger, and he shoved Abu Bakr's hand forward. Then it says each of them wanted the other to stretch his hand. So there was a struggle so that he could strike the bargain with him. Umar stretched out Abu Bakr's hand, saying, my power is for you with your power. They demanded confirmation of the oath, but Ali and Zubair stayed away. Al-Zubair drew his sword, saying, I will not put it back until the oath of allegiance is rendered to Ali alayhi salam. When the news reached Abu Bakr and Umar, the latter said, hit him with a stone and seize the sword. So not even seize the sword and break it. Hit him with a stone and seize the sword. It's stated that Umar rushed to the scene and brought them forcibly while telling them that they must give the oath of allegiance willingly or unwillingly, so that they rendered their oath of allegiance. So this is from the Tarikh, Arabic edition, volume 2, page number 187 and 189. And then inshallah, Sayyid Firdaus can continue on in terms of the reliability of this narration.
Thank you, Sayyid Ali Imam. That is extremely revealing about the events and possibly the motives of the people involved at the time. I mean, maybe it sounds like a conspiracy theory, maybe it isn't, but it seems as if Abu Bakr was the more conniving, more cunning, more manipulative of the two, and he engineered this whole situation with Umar's help. in order to gain the caliphate. And the reason I say this is because throughout the narratives that have been presented, Umar was the one who was being hot-headed and belligerent, and Abu Bakr remained calm. There's no report that Abu Bakr was either visibly upset or outraged or stricken with grief. What we see is they both remained together throughout this period. When they finally get to Saqifah Bani Sada, which doesn't seem like a coincidence or a chance gathering, something that happened on the spur of it, because as you said, Umar was saying, don't anybody dare say that the Prophet has been martyred or that he will kill them. I mean, if you look at it on a from a different angle, it seems as if he was actively trying to suppress the news of the Prophet's martyrdom. Now, to what purpose is that becomes apparent when you get to Saqifah Bani Sada and the events that occurred there. Abu Bakr probably realized that Umar was the more emotional one, the one who was more prone to outbursts and uncontrollable behavior. So the first thing Abu Bakr did was suggest him as the caliph, and as he expected, Umar turned around and says, no, you're older, you should be the caliph. And I think what Umar probably thought at this time was, he's an old man, he probably won't very last while, and yeah, let him take the heat for the first 6 months or a year. I mean, that's what I'm thinking. And then we come to the report where they forcibly took Mullah Amir to give bay'ah. Now, I know some new viewers might have this in their mind that these are the companions of the Prophet, and God must have known, Allah must have known that this is going to happen. So why did he allow it to happen? Why would the Almighty, the All-Knowing, the All-Seeing allow his Prophet after his martyrdom for his mission to be hijacked in such a way? Well, if that is a thought that's going through your heads, just go back to when Allah knew what Iblis was going to do, and Allah allowed him to come to the heavens and live amongst the angels, and eventually ejected him from the heavens with the permission to try and do what he could to deviate humankind. And I think this is extremely comparable, and it's the continuation of Satan's work, where these people were deviated by Satan and carried on in the same way. But some people may wonder where this is coming from. But coming back to Shia evidence for this, and we're not beleaguering the Shia point, because this is evidence from Sunni works, but the Shia position is quite clear. If you go to Kitab-e-Sulaim, there's a tradition where somebody came to Hazrat Ali ibn Abi Talib al-Islam and said, people are giving bay'ah to Abu Bakr, and Ali ibn Abi Talib al-Islam asked, was the first person to give bay'ah an old man? The person replied yes, and Ali ibn Abi Talib al-Islam, Madinatul Ilm, the successor to the Prophet, said that first person to give bay'ah to Abu Bakr was Iblis. Now, this was a day of Eid for Iblis. He was rejoicing. He was seeing all his efforts come to fruition. And this is exactly what Iblis has led the Sunnis' first Khalif, the great usurper, to do. Now, we come back to the verse that Sayyid Ali Imam, I believe you mentioned, which was, do not go back on your heels. And this is exactly what we're seeing. Abu Bakr, Umar, the Ansar, the Quraysh, a large proportion of the companions turning back on their heels, ignoring the wishes of the Prophet and the clear designation of the Prophet, and electing someone to serve their own interests. If this election was such an important matter, why did it not take place before the Prophet's Shahada? But that's a different, Saqifah is a different topic altogether. But Sayyid Firdaus, I'm going to trouble you a little, and I can see people are going to raise objections to these reports because it destroys the Sunni concept of Khilafat and the fact that they were all absolutely cordial with each other. So could you tell us a bit more about the authenticity of these reports, please?
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم صلى الله على محمد وعلى محمد وعجل فرجهم. Thank you very much, Sayyid Ali and Sayyid Nazim Shah. Also, Sayyid Nazim Shah, for your questions. It's very important. I think it's exactly as you said. Parts of these actions that they took that took place were pre-planned, and part of it was not so organized so well. So basically, our accounts, the Shia accounts, is clear that there was a clear agreement between 5 people before even the Prophet passed away. So and they they pledged to each other and made a covenant and wrote it down that they will definitely, after the Prophet, they take away, they will not let the family of the Prophet to take over the leadership. So and they stick to their plans, and the 5 people were Abu Bakr, Umar, Abu Ubaidah, as we see in all these reports, and Salim Mawla Abi Udhaifa, and another Ansari who is Mu'az ibn Jabal. In some reports, some other people who were in a greater circle. They were 40 people and so on, and each had their kind of support as well. But that's for another time, maybe, because about the incidents surrounding Saqifah, there is so much material, so much information, so much details that one needs to we cannot do justice to these in shows like this. We just touch the surface, and we just present the obvious. If you go to see the correlations, the hidden secret information that you will find out by comparing these reports, it's amazing. It's just, you can see the level of evil and the conspiracy that was going on. As you said, Abu Bakr was very calculated, so he was pre-planning his steps all the time. So he was a step ahead or 2 ahead of Umar all the time. Even Umar himself, when he gives this account of Saqifah in their authentic books like Sahih Bukhari, for example, directly from Sahih Bukhari, Umar himself says that I had planned, or I had made up some things to say in my mind before going to Saqifah. And how long before was that on the way from the Prophet's place to Saqifah, or was that even a day or 2 before, or long before that? We don't know. It just says, Omar says that I had planned to say some things that I liked them myself, so I was just planning to say those things, but then Abu Bakr just stopped me and said, "Shut up," as Said Ali mentioned, and he kind of carried on. So and then Umar says that Abu Bakr, everything that I wanted to say, Abu Bakr said them, and even better. They were, of course, at the bigger picture, they were very coordinated, but in the details of what to say and so on, and how to react and so on, they had sometimes their differences, and that's what we see in these reports. And yeah, it's very interesting that it's very obvious also that as Said Ali very explicitly exposed them in this case, that Abu Bakr is just playing a role. He is telling Omar to shut up just a few minutes ago, and also shut up when he was saying that the Prophet has not passed away and so on, and rebuking all the time. And all of a sudden he's become this pious person and says Omar to take real leadership. If you say he is not capable of handling such small matters and cannot speak 2 words of truth or correct statements, then how can you say that he is worthy of Khilafah? So definitely Abu Bakr is playing a role, and you can see this is not something honest and something that is according to not the action of a God-fearing person. You see that they're after the power no matter what. They're playing, and they do whatever they can to get to that place. And this report that Said Ali from Tabari mentioned, it's very interesting because this exposes, like we mentioned, every single show till now, we exposed loads of stuff that their scholars just change. their scholars have double standards when it comes to things that goes against the dogma. They just weaken them, and whatever is in favor of the ideology, then they will push it to the front. They push it as the standard narrative in their books, in their history books, and their especially the scholars of hadith, the hadith scholars. They do this a lot. Historians as well. They distort also a lot of these reports. But their hadith scholars, it's very famous from them that they do this all the time. And we are here to expose these things. And interestingly, this very narration that Sayeda Ali quoted is one of those. It has a very important point that is very beneficial for them, and that is the point in this narration is the statement of Sa'ad ibn Ubadah that Sayeda Ali quoted. That Sa'ad ibn Ubadah literally, so to speak, admitted to the statement of Abu Bakr, saying that from among us are the leaders and you are the vices, you are the ministers, so to speak, the Ansar. So Sa'ad ibn Ubadah says, Sadaqt, you have spoken the truth. So he is admitting in this report. This is the only report that mentions this. All other reports mention that someone was saying you've killed Sa'ad ibn Ubadah, and Umar says, may Allah kill Sa'ad ibn Ubadah. So they even say Bukhari, say Muslim, and some other books. Many of the reports that we already presented, they say that there was this kind of exchange between Sa'ad ibn Ubadah and Abu Bakr and Umar. May Allah kill him. Qatalahu Allah. As Umar says. And in this tradition, it's Sa'ad is actually admitting to this statement of Abu Bakr and says, accepting, so to speak. And this is the thing that they need. So, because this is a very great point for the dogmatists. So they want to just use it by any means possible. But the narration of Tabari has some extra points about pledging, forcing the family of the Prophet, and also Zubair's sword was broken, so stuff like that, forcing them to pledge allegiance and so. So they have other more groomed, so to speak, versions of this hadith. They have cut some part of this. The most famous account is here. We have from Musnad Ahmad ibn Hanbal, who is at the level of teachers of Tabari actually. Most of the chain is the same, only the first narrator is the different one. The first narrator of Ahmad ibn Hanbal is Affan ibn Muslim from Abu Awana, and Tabari is another person who's also having authenticated by their scholars from Abu Awana. So their first narrator is different, but the entire narration is the same. So it's the same narration basically from Humayd Ibn Abdul Rahman al-Himyari, who is actually a tabi. He's not a companion of the Prophet. So Ahmad ibn Hanbal narrates this narration that when the Messenger of Allah passed away, and Abu Bakr was with a group in Medina, and then he came and uncovered the face of the Prophet and kissed and so on, and the things that Sayeda Ali already mentioned from Tabari. Until the point where Abu Bakr says, from among us are the Quraysh are to be in charge of this affair. So the righteous people are but followers of the righteous of them, and the wrongdoers among the people are but followers of them. So basically saying that the good and evil should come from Quraysh. The best of the people are in Quraysh, the worst of the people also in Quraysh. Like they have other traditions also about this. In any case, and then Sa'ad says, Sa'ad admits to this, that yes, you are the Umara, you are the leaders, we are the ministers, and says, yes, you have spoken the truth, Sadaqt. And then says, we are the advisors and you are the leaders, Sa'ad ibn Ubadah allegedly says. And this is the thing that they need. So let's see what their scholars then say about this narration. Firstly, we have the annotator of this book, Shu'ayb Arn'aut, a Salafi scholar. We quoted him before several times, I think, in these shows. And his footnote of this says Sahihun li ghayrihi. It's an authentic narration, but by other supportive narrations. And the reason is, and its narrators are thiqat, are trustworthy. All of them are from the narrators of Bukhari and Muslim. وهو mursal, but it's a disconnected narration. The content is sahih by other supportive narration, he says, but it's a disconnected narration. Because Humayd Ibn Abdul Rahman, which is the Himyari, Ibn Hajar has said that he is a tabi and has not met or experienced the time of Abu Bakr and Umar. And in this narration, he also does not explicitly mentions that from whom he has narrated this tradition. So, and that's basically it. And Ahmad ibn Hanbal is the only scholar who has mentioned it, this tradition. The narration comes from Tabi. All of its narrators are from the narrators of Sahih, but the content is Sahih li ghayrihi. Sahih, it's authentic by other supportive narrations. We have here the Shaykh al-Islam of the Salafists, which is Ibn Taymiyyah. What he says is that as about Abu Bakr, then Sa'ad ibn Ubadah refused to pledge allegiance to him because they had originally chosen him as leader. So originally Ansar wanted to pledge allegiance to Sa'ad ibn Ubadah as a leader, but then when Abu Bakr and Umar came, then they pledged allegiance to people pledged allegiance to Abu Bakr and not to Sa'ad, and that's why he kind of became upset with it, and something remained in his heart that what the hell, they came and ruined my thing. However, Ibn Taymiyyah then continues, says, however, despite that, he did not manifest opposition and did not reject the truth, nor did he insist upon falsehood. Rather, Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, and here comes the narration, has narrated in the Musnad of As-Siddiq from Affan, from so and so, from Humayd ibn Abdul Rahman al-Himyari, and then mentions the hadith of Saqifah, and in it has been mentioned that As-Siddiq, referring to Abu Bakr, said, I know, O Sa'ad, that the Messenger of Allah said, when you were sitting here, Quraysh are to be in charge of this affair, so the righteous people are but followers of the righteous of them, and the wrongdoers among the people are but followers of them. And then Sa'ad said to him, you have spoken the truth, we are the advisors, and you are the leaders. So Ibn Taymiyyah then says, so therefore, this is a Hasan, good, disconnected narration. A Hasan, disconnected narration. So they make a differentiate when the mursal or disconnected narration is in their favor. They call it Hasan mursal. We have also spoken in the past shows, many of the scholars, they differentiate between a mursal, which is a good mursal or a bad mursal. Like Dhahabi said that most of the narrations of Musabda Qubayni's book Maghazi, for example, are either sahih or good mursal. This is also the same thing saying Ibn Taymiyyah saying. So because it has this addition, he wants to try to make a point that even Sa'ad ibn Ubadah did not refuse to pledge allegiance to Abu Bakr. And the evidence, the proof for that is this good disconnected narration that comes from Humayd ibn Abdul Rahman. And then Ibn Taymiyyah says, and maybe Humayd has taken it from one of the companions who have witnessed this incident. Maybe. So when it comes to their thing, they act upon maybes, probably, conjecture, whatever. But when it comes to when we use, for example, a narration and say, slave of Umar was narrating a narration from Umar about this incident, and he had even witnessed a time of Jahiliyyah and so on, they say, no, it's mursal, he was not a witness, whatever. So someone who is actually not present, is not a witness of the incident, becomes now the authority and taken as a proof, even if it goes against their authentic narrations like in Bukhari, Muslim, and so on, that Umar said, may Allah kill Sa'ad, if Saad was admitting to Abu Bakr that saying, yeah, you're saying you're telling the truth and pledged allegiance to him apparently after that statement, then why is Umar saying may Allah kill him? It doesn't make any sense if he was not making an opposition. So it doesn't make any sense for Umar to say that. And now we see that even this disconnected narration supersedes their authentic narration, say Bukhari, saying Muslim from Umar himself, saying that may Allah kill Sa'd. So they have no principle when it comes to their dogma. So when it comes to their ideology, whatever rubs it, whatever helps it, they stick to it. So it doesn't matter, disconnected, not disconnected, witness, not witness, they stick to it, whatever. And they take that as a proof, as an evidence to supersede even their authentic accounts. And then in it, there is, in this tradition, in this narration, and in it, there is a very great benefit. A very great benefit. وَفِيهِ فَائِدَةٌ جَلِيلَةٌ جِدًّا. A very great benefit. So whenever it benefits them, they accept it. That's the main rule. That's the main principle. Whatever helps you keep to the dogma, help the dogma, help the ideology. That's the criteria. And then Ibn Taymiyyah says, and that is the fact that Sa'd ibn Ubadah stepped down from his original stance in claiming leadership and admitted to a Siddiq, referring to Abu Bakr's leadership. May Allah be satisfied with them all, as he says. So this was from Minhaj al-Sunnah of Ibn Taymiyyah, volume 1, page 536 and 537. Here we have Suyuti, another scholar, mentions this narration in his book Jami' al-Ahadith. He doesn't mention the version of Tabari, which is contains the entire thing, that the family of the Prophet were forced to pledge allegiance, and Zubair's sword was broken, and so on. He doesn't mention that entire text. He mentioned the text of Ahmad ibn Hanbal, as we mentioned, as we quoted, and Suyuti at the end says it has been narrated by Ahmad ibn Hanbal and Ibn Jarir Tabari. So he acknowledges that Tabari has also narrated it, but he chooses to mention only the text from Ahmad ibn Hanbal, which is the short one, and then says, وَقَالَ ibn al-Munzir هَذَا حَدِيثٌ حَسَنٌ, and quotes Ibn al-Munzir, who said that this hadith is Hasan. وَإِنْ كَانَ فِيهِ انْقِطَاعٌ, even though if it has a disconnection, because Humayd Ibn Abdul Rahman has not witnessed the time of Abu Bakr. And he says, and maybe, probably, he has taken it from his father. Humayd Ibn Abdul Rahman has taken it from his father, or from some others of the companions of the Prophet, and the story was probably famous among them. So you see, he deems this narration as Hasan, even though it's a disconnected narration, and just says probably he has taken it from his father or some other companion, probably. And this was probably, again, famous among companions of the Prophet, or famous among people at that time. And as I said, this is the shorter version. They authenticate, Ibn Taymiyyah authenticates the shorter version without the entire thing. Suyuti authenticates it, or quotes Ibn al-Munzir and Ibn al-Munzir's authentication. And here we have Al-Kandehlawi, who says in his book Hayat al-Sahaba, volume 1, page 492, he says, narrated Ahmad ibn Hanbal and Ibn Jarir. He also acknowledges that Ahmad ibn Hanbal and Ibn Jarir Tabari have narrated this narration. And he says, through a Hasan chain from Humayd ibn Abdul Rahman. Also authenticated the shorter version, not the longer version of Tabari. Says that Tabari has narrated it, but the text is that what Ahmad ibn Hanbal has said, the shorter version, which has this part from Saad admitting to the allegiance of Abu Bakr, or its statement of Abu Bakr. And then Khan Dehlawi at the end says that as it has been mentioned in Kanzul Amal, this narration, and Al-Haythami has said that Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal has narrated it, and in Sahih, the first part of it has been narrated in Sahih Muslim or Sahih Bukhari, and its narrators are trustworthy except that Humayd ibn Abdul Rahman has not witnessed the time of Abu Bakr. So you see that Khan Dehlawi, in any case, at the top, he says that based not in Hassan. So authenticates the narration. And also we have here Al-Haythami, who is this famous scholar who has written the As-Sawa'iq al-Muhriqa, which is a book in refutation of Shia. And he mentions that in this book also quotes the narration of Ahmad ibn Hanbal, the version of Ahmad ibn Hanbal, and then says, and this indicates the weakness of what Ibn Abdul Barr has narrated. So he also prefers the narration of Humayd ibn Abdul Rahman. By this, taking this as a proof to reject or to refute the opinion of Ibn Abdul Barr, the statement of Ibn Abdul Barr, or the report of Ibn Abdul Barr, and that Saad refused to pledge allegiance to Abu Bakr until he met Allah. Until he died, he did not pledge allegiance. And Al-Haythami says that this tradition of Ahmad ibn Hanbal weakens that opinion. So it supersedes again that opinion or that report. So you see again, because they like this, because it has something beneficial to them, as Ibn Taymiyyah says, فائدة جليلة جدا, very seriously important benefit has this narration for them, which is Saad admitting to be Ansar being the advisors, and the leaders should be from Quraysh. That's why they authenticate this narration, these scholars. And the same thing also, there are so many other examples of their scholars saying the same thing or authenticate this narration and taking this narration as a proof to kind of prove that even Sa'd ibn Ubadah did not refuse to pledge allegiance. He pledged allegiance to Abu Bakr anyways, or even at the Saqifah directly, he admitted to Abu Bakr's or the Quraysh being worthy of leadership. And even, for example, we have Ibn Kathir, who's a Salafi actually. He makes an entire chapter, ذكر اعتراف سعد بن عبادة بصحة ما قاله الصديق يوم السقيفة, which is the mentioning of the confession or admission of Sa'd ibn Ubadah about the correctness of the statement of Abu Bakr in the day of Saqifah. And then the first narration that he quotes is this very same narration from Ahmad ibn Hanbal. He does not say it is a disconnected whatever. He just tries to fool people that this just tries to push this narrative. And he does not mention the account of Tabari. So he does not like that one because it has some additional things, and then it makes the entire thing for him muddy. So he tries to stick to these narrations which pleases his kind of stance as their stance. So you see these double standards, these playing around. They have no principles when it comes to ideology. So they just overrun every principle that they have built, they have made by themselves when it comes to something that favors them and some things which goes against their kind of narrative. This is the same, especially about the family of the Prophet. Whenever something favors the family of the Prophet, that favors the stance of the Shia and the beliefs of the Shia, they go against it. Also, another point is that whenever it comes to the companions of the Prophet, anything negative about them, they try to just whitewash it, just distorted, just cut the narrations, just present the things that helps them and hide the rest. And they act upon this dogma that they shouldn't discuss the disputes and the dismerits. As Dhahabi says, they are even they do really stick to even destroying the evidence that goes against the narrative that they want to present. So these were just a few examples. There are much more examples of even for this one narration that they have authenticated it, and they have taken this as an evidence. I can present a lot of other scholars, but I think these were enough because yeah, we don't want to make these shows so long. I think these are enough to make the point clear that they first Ahmad ibn Hanbal as completely cuts part of the narration. Even at the middle of it, it says "Dhakara hadith." In the middle of hadith is also cut by him. And just the last part, which is beneficial for them, that he has put that one in his musnad. There are scholars who have authenticated. They have taken always the narration of Ahmad ibn Hanbal, even though the chain is the same, and the account is authenticated because it has a benefit for them. It has a good thing, useful for them in their ideology. That was it from me.
Thank you, Sayyid Firdaus. I won't go over the arguments and repeat what Sayyid Firdaus has said, which, if you have followed closely, there are a number of concerns that would scream out to an unbiased and sincere seeker of knowledge. If you're watching this video to learn the truth about the events, you should rightly be concerned, and you should query why it is that Sunni historians and academics have continued to selectively take parts of events which favor their ideological and dogmatic stance of promoting the justice of all the Sahaba and trying to show that there was no actual conflict in between the companions. From what you've heard today, you will clearly see that this conflict has been narrated through various chains, through various students of companions. We have this report, and here's where the alarm bells start to ring. So instead of narrating the whole report, which shows the unsavory events in Islamic history taking place, what this scholarship has done is take things, isolate them from the preceding and succeeding events to neutralize the context and the situation, so that there is no adverse circumstantial inference to be drawn from them, and then present them as the event itself. Now, if you're a scholar and a historian, that is, I mean, I believe that's the greatest injustice you can do, and it's the gravest breach of moral duty you have as a scholar or historian, to twist and manipulate events in that manner to try and push a position which is not even mandated in the religion. I'm going to take this opportunity to thank Sayyid Ali Imam and Sayyid Firdaus for their hard work and for bringing this wealth of information. And I'm going to leave it to you, the listeners, our audience, are informed and capable of, or a capable audience. You're certainly much more capable than Farid, who hasn't even been able to muster one single tweet or a single message in response to these videos. He's had 8 weeks now, so we haven't foisted this on him and given him no time to respond. He hasn't even responded to the first video. So, but you, our audience, are much more capable than he is, and you're completely capable and completely competent to make up your own minds and consider this evidence and reach a conclusion. I won't tell you what conclusion to reach. You know my view on this matter, and you know Sayyid Ali Imam's and Sayyid Firdausi's view that Abu Bakr manipulated the situation. Umar supported him. They usurped caliphate, and they committed atrocities on the progeny, on the family of the Prophet. Now, if for any reason you think that there might be any substance to an alternative view, look at these reports, look at the manipulation that has taken place, look at the fact that these were the people who were being supported by the powers that be at the time, and ask yourselves if you can trust a single word that they have said. Because if not, the alternative is that there is something that is being hidden. There is an undercurrent to this historical narrative, and it is not a nice, pleasant undercurrent. It's a very, very dark, painful, and grievous undercurrent, which is being hidden from Muslims, which is being hidden from the world to paint a picture of this perfect Muslim era that you can view through rose-tinted glasses and seem to think, oh yes, what a golden era. It was not a golden era. A golden era which Sunnis claim was led by the rightly guided caliphs, the caliphs who were the Rashidun. But it certainly wasn't a golden era if you belonged to the family of the Prophet. For the family of the Prophet, this was a period of trials and tribulations and heartbreak. Heartbreak to see that those very people who claim to be companions of the Prophet hijacking Islam and turning it from an empowering and liberating movement for everyone in society to this power-hungry, autocratic, dictatorial state where people were killing people, raping and torturing people simply in order to consolidate power, and power that they had usurped from the rightful heirs to the Prophet. I will leave you with these thoughts, and on behalf of everyone at Baitul Ghadir, including myself, Sayyid Ali Imam and Sayyid Firdaus, I bid you farewell. Allah Hafiz, and see you in the next show. Thank you.